Christy Bird McKeeve, the CEO of Evergood podcast. Today is less about conversations with others who have been in the or in are in the healthcare education innovation space. Today is really going to be a tutorial, if you will, about graduate medical education and some key points that people don't know. I have been so incredibly lucky to be part of the beginning of a sponsoring institution and two new residency programs in Chico. In fact, I'm proudly wearing the shirt that I got. I was CEO of Healthy Rural California, and in 2020 through now, Healthy Rural California was a brand new nonprofit, and we then developed and became accredited at Healthy Rural California as a sponsoring institution with a new psychiatry and family medicine residency programs. And really thrilled that the second class of psychiatry residents started and actually moved to Chico, a GME naive area prior to Healthy Rural California. And then the family medicine residents started this summer. So I'm just so glad, and I'm not there anymore, but my heart is always going to be with this nonprofit consortium model, non-clinic for graduate medical education. So very few people get to be behind the scenes in the beginning of the creation of new residency programs. It was such an honor. There are many people that I had the privilege to work with and learn from, and it just has been an incredible journey. And there's a lot going on right now in medical education innovation, and I think there's a lot of interest in starting new residency programs. We do know that residencies and fellowships do help address recruitment and retention of physicians, and which are acute. There's an acute need in rural areas. And so there's a real balance between what resources are available in terms of physicians who are board certified in the specialty that they need to be in order to achieve an accredited residency program or fellowship. Um, and there's a real balance. It's an interesting point in time where you might go too far away from having those board certified physicians in order to even start a residency program. So there's a bit of urgency. I think that if a region or a city or a hospital is really thinking about it, it's good to act sooner rather than later and get the data that you would need in order to make good decisions and build the program out. There's just a decline in physicians, period, across the United States. And so, right, the time is now. But you also have to do the due diligence. So I'm going to talk about something that I think most people are not aware of, and that is the sponsoring institution. And you have to think about the academics of graduate medical education because that's really what it is. It's an academic learning program where MDs and DOs come into the residency and then into a fellowship, if that's the path that they pursue, to learn. But also, they're doctors and they can serve patients. So it's an incredible opportunity for thinking about how to make your FQHC or your hospital a teaching clinic, teaching hospital. And most residency programs were started many years earlier, sometimes 40, 50, 60 years earlier, and nobody really knows what it was like to start that process. Most residency programs and fellowships are at a hospital, and there's a medical school nearby. So I just really wanted to quickly review what a sponsoring institution is. So it is either a hospital, a clinic, uh, it could be a nonprofit, non-clinic, such as the consortium model that I helped build in Chico in Northern California. And it is it's kind of like a nonprofit, right? Where you have a governing board, and that governing board for the academics is a Graduate Medical Education Committee, or GMAC. There's a DIO. The DIO is a designated institutional official, and that's really where the buck stops for all residency programs and fellowships. The DIO is typically an MD or a DO. However, it could be someone like a CEO. So there's a clinic in Reading that became a sponsoring institution. It's an FQHC. They became a sponsoring institution about a decade ago. And their DIO was the CEO of the clinic, and his name was uh, Dean Germano. He retired recently, but became a really well-known figure in Chester Community Health Clinic, and really helped run that clinic. So there's the GME committee. The GME committee meets once each quarter, but we do tend to meet more frequently because as residency programs grow or you have more residents, the residents need to be involved in the GME committee. But there also has to be this sort of like ongoing approval. Are we going to submit a new application to be considered for accreditation? Are we going to need to do some interventions for a resident not meeting their milestones? There's different committees that report up, and there has to be ongoing discussions of patient safety and quality improvement. There's also a pretty thick volume of policies specifically to the sponsoring institution. And so all of that is needed in order for the sponsoring institution to be accredited. So that's a good year in the making in and of itself, because you have to sort of pull together the GME committee, the DIO, they have to lead it, they have to review all the policies. Those policies need to be in place. I believe our Healthy Rural California application for accreditation to become a sponsoring institution was 216 pages. You have to have a hospital that's your main site, and you have to have the DIO and their CV. You need to have also some financial support, like a commitment from whether it's the hospital CEO, CFO, the FQHC, or in our place with Healthy Rural California as the CEO, I was with our board, and we made all of those decisions to form the sponsoring institution in the early years of development in 2020 and 2021. And I think we got accredited in the fall of 2022. So once the sponsoring institution is accredited, then you may submit applications for accredited for the specialty residency that you're focused on. The residency, there's certain time frames, so it's good to kind of move quickly. Maybe it's preparing the application for sponsoring institution and submitting that, and then immediately starting on that first residency that you want to get accredited for. So that while you're waiting, it's a good 6 months between submitting your application to to ACGME for sponsoring institution status, and then getting a site visit, and then 6 months later, you would hear about the accreditation. So in that 6 months, there's a lot of waiting. And so that's a great time to then prepare your residency application for accreditation. Now, most people know about this accredited residency part. Because there's a program director, and that program director is the lead and the face of that residency program. So we started our psychiatry residency, and got accredited for that. It was more than a year because we really took our time to build out the infrastructure for the application to be strong. And fortunately, we did get accredited for that in February 2023, if I'm remembering my timeline. And then from February 2023 to July 1st, 2024, is when we did the recruitment for that first class of residents. And then they started in 2024. So it's quite a long time frame. And Healthy Rural California, with my leadership, really took the time to make sure were submitting a strong application and that we had all of the infrastructure built out and the ability to get the teaching health center funding for the psychiatry residency, for example. Um, and then we got grant monies from the state of California, HCI department to really have the staff that's required for a strong application for accreditation and that they were trained. So that whole process of becoming a sponsoring institution and then submitting the residency application in this particular case was psychiatry. That we were really getting creative and innovative to make sure that we had the 4-year psychiatry curriculum really solid and with excellent partners. There's also an academic affiliation that is needed, and ours at Healthy World California was both UC Davis School of Medicine and the Touro University College of Osteopathic Medicine. Both of those medical schools provided immense amount of faculty development and training, great partnerships. Hey to you all. I eternally grateful for the support that you gave, and then becoming volunteer clinical faculty enabled the faculty teaching the psychiatry residents to just have an incredible amount of resources at their fingertips and really elevating um, the academics of medical education. Because if you look at Chico, it is an hour and a half north of Sacramento, and there is no medical school currently north of Sacramento. So all the way up into the Oregon, actually the top part of Oregon, there is no medical school. And so that academic affiliation is really important. And an hour and a half between Chico and Sacramento, where UC Davis Health is, it's a drive. So you're not going to have faculty driving from Sacramento to Chico to teach. So you really had to get those physicians and the board certified physicians for certain positions called core faculty, and the program directors and associate program directors, and then train them to be able to teach the residents, at a distance, right? They're not actually at UC Davis. Um, so I think that gives a good sense of how you would the steps that you have to take in order to become to start a new residency. I'm going to spend a little bit of time on fellowships because I have some um, friends right now who would really love to see a GI fellowship in Reading. I have been hired to help them and to find a way forward to make this happen. It's really complex because you need to have the sponsoring institution, right? And then you have to have the residency, which is the foundation for a GI fellowship, and that is internal medicine. And the sponsoring institution has to have IM in order for a fellowship to be applied for. Now, there's a lot of different ways to do residents and fellows education. Like, is there a GI fellowship that would like to have rotations in Reading? And so maybe it's a month or quite possibly a year. When I looked at the GI fellowship requirements, though, you need to have a lot of research. And so when you get far enough away from an academic, medical school, your chances of having research are diminished. And so it's a lot for the community to have to build out a research or bring research to the region and have the sponsoring institution with an internal medicine residency in order to apply for the fellowship. So there's just a lot of requirements. And if you don't meet those requirements in a separate application for accreditation to ACGME, the chances of you getting approved are pretty slim. And so it all builds on each other, and I will spend a little bit of time on UME. So, let me just say that it felt like in February 2023 when we heard about the accreditation for the psychiatry residency at Healthy Rural California, it felt like the very next day, there was great pressure to begin conversations about undergraduate medical education. And let me just be clear, we in common language just refer to undergraduate education as college, right? And then you go into a graduate program. However, medical school is considered undergraduate and then it's graduate medical education. So you'll hear about UME and GME. And so I thought, whew, my work is done. It's February 2023, and we received accreditation, initial accreditation. That there is actually many steps that follow, but initial accreditation means you can recruit the residents and build that residency program. Um, and my work was done. Like I had achieved the impossible, and what more could there be? Well, it turns out that graduate medical education is a really great foundation for you and me. And I I still laugh because in my mind, you typically have a medical school, there's like a hospital across the street. It was all founded in the 1960s and 70s. They've had their sponsoring institution, they've had their residency programs. They are the experts in all things graduate medical education and in medical school. Um, and that then once you have a medical school, you get the chance to build graduate medical education. And I just laugh because I quickly was informed that when you have strong graduate medical education, that is actually the foundation for undergraduate medical education. And in that, I also need to add that so there is a shortage of physicians that's quite alarming. It's about 170,000 physicians in the year 2030, which is not that far away. It's going to be a shortage of 170,000 physicians across the United States. And in particular, rural and underserved areas are going to feel that pinch even more. So there has been a good decade plus of medical schools expanding enrollment. I hope to do a whole separate interview about UC Davis School of Medicine and their innovative medical education pathways. But in short, they have expanded a good, I think they've grown in enrollment about 20 medical students at least. I'd have to do the math on that one, and maybe I can tease that out in an interview because I think they've been expanding every year, and I'm not sure where they are right now. But in order to expand your enrollment in medical school to meet this looming crisis in just a few years, it's hard to believe 2030 is just around the corner, that you have to actually expand your number of core clerkship or the year 3 clinical rotations. And that is where the pinch is because there's sort of if you have a hospital or an FQHC and you have residents and medical students, it's really at a certain point kind of a bit of a problem if you have too many of medical students and residents. There has to be a sort of ratio of preceptors and faculty with the residents and the residents teaching the medical students, and right there's a sort of a formula for making that effective. And remember, these are education pathways for the learners. So you don't want all of them to be, you don't want a bunch of medical students and little faculty to teach them. So the the pinch for medical schools across the country is not necessarily admitting more students. It's where do they go for those year 3 rotations so that they can learn and meet those requirements for their own degree and development. Um, and so that is, and then when you skip up to residency programs and graduate medical education, they are required to teach medical students. So then, right, you start with the graduate medical education programs in Chico, like we're doing with Healthy Rural California. Then you can start sending those medical students year 3 and really build out branch campuses or regional campuses. And it's a fascinating, like most people don't know this, right? You just kind of think, oh, there's a medical school and there's a hospital and they get taught. Well, it's now taking villages and regions coming together to establish new graduate medical education programs and fellowships, residencies, and taking medical students as well. So it's an interesting place to be in. I am, as a consultant, CEO of Evergood Consultants, available to talk about this. I think my strength is really getting to understand the community, doing basically an environmental scan and then a feasibility study, and then connecting remote medical schools with the clinics, helping to assess and then be that local guide. Because as I started this presentation, it was really like most people are not in this space and most people don't know where to begin. So I'm really that consultant that can come in and help make those connections happen. I do firmly, I'm very firm about the fact that I am not the person who's going to be able to conduct a feasibility evaluation of a hospital and what would their CMS reimbursement rates be if they were to have residents. And then there's actually it depends on specialties. So the CMS reimbursement rate question is something, and I have great references to bring in for that. And I also would recommend, like, I could probably prepare an application for accreditation. I definitely could do the sponsoring institution part of it, but at a certain point, I would always recommend hiring, and I could do that with you as your consultant, um, the experts to just finalize that paperwork, make sure we're not missing something, give it another pair of eyeballs. ACGME is very wonderful in what they say they're looking for in an application. However, there's a lot that isn't sort of readily available. You kind of have to know that specialty, like I am, is very different from FM. And you don't know that until you're in this space of like helping build new programs, or maybe somebody's kind of put on warning and needs some consultants to come in and help make sure that their curriculum is strengthened in the way that it needs to be. So I really do want to be clear about what my limitations are, but it's actually quite a lot of the work that gets done is in my bandwidth to help with consulting, because there's just it's a lot of like, did you know you need this? And okay, those are the people that are identified. Let's make sure that they're qualified, and sort of bringing the community together and being a project manager as well, as I think my strength would be. So I hope that you found this interesting and that if you are really passionate about creating a new residency or fellowship, I'd be happy to talk to you. It is not something that everybody can do. And I think there's a lot of, and when I think about rural areas, at least the ones I've worked in, we think about, gosh, we need more pediatricians. Well, I will tell you straight up, this needs to be said. It's really hard to establish a new pediatric residency program. It's really hard to get pediatric residents from one sponsoring institution to rotate elsewhere. And then I just heard that there's less medical students pursuing a pediatric residency than ever before. And so the whole thing seems really impacted, but we did at Healthy World California review the ACGME requirements for a new pediatric residency, and they are enormous. I can't remember off the top of my head, but there's like NICU, PICU, like research. It really is, you know, pediatrics is in an urban area. It has to be because it just is so intensive and they're in their requirements. Um, and so there's just there's just some things that like um, aren't possible. And again, in the beginning, I mentioned that there's sort of a tipping point, and I think about my friends in Northern California who have seen a sharp decrease in rheumatologists, and so you'd think, okay, we need to do a rheumatology fellowship, and yet there aren't enough board certified rheumatologists in Northern California anymore in order to have a fellowship. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting equation. Um, I think I just wanted to say though that, you know, we did the impossible at Healthy Rural California. It really was impossible. I was told by many people, not going to happen. You're not going to get a new family medicine residency. You're certainly not going to get a psychiatry residency up and running. And we did it. But that doesn't mean it ends there. The ongoing work, the financial commitments, it takes it all working together. And so yeah, all really exciting stuff. Feel free to reach out to me, evergoodconsultants@gmail.com. Thanks so much.
Lost my sense of humor, I found them too fun to know. Overgrass, blow up kayaks, would have helped with angry toes, but it gave mashed potatoes. Take that meatloaf back, hi! Birthday dehydrated cake and lots of wine so nice with clean dark hair. I think it's a waltz, I think it's a waltz, but I know it's the longest 2 miles of her. I think it's a waltz, I think it's a waltz, but I know it's the longest 2 miles of her.